Hey there, welcome back to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. We just spoke to Nick Ellsmore from TrustWave on the topic of MSSPs conducting third-party risk assessments. If you missed it, I would strongly encourage you to go back and watch. But right now, it's time for our MSP industry news topic of the day, presenting our big idea in business. A lot of thought goes into which cyber solution vendors MSSPs ultimately align themselves with. There are many factors to consider. What capabilities do you want to prioritize based on client demand, or how do you assess your weak points or gaps in services? And then what are the top qualities in vendors that you're looking for? So this next segment is going to look at some of the key strategies for MSSPs looking to build their own alliance of vendor partners. And so with that, I would now like to bring in and reintroduce my co-host, Ryan Morris from Morris Management Consultants. Ryan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. And speaking of third parties, right, it's kind of an unofficial theme of today's conversation. If an end user has many players in their supply chain, our supply chain as service providers is the people who make tools and technologies that we use to provide services through to our clients. It is absolutely true that everything Nick said about evaluating and assessing the risk profile of your supply chain, ditto for what we're talking about here. But specifically when we're going into the question of our portfolio, right? Last count in the industry, there's more than 2,600 different cybersecurity vendors, right? We're a unique and odd industry space that, as mature as we are not yet seeing a significant amount of consolidation, mergers, acquisitions, failures, attrition, right? Almost every industry, right? When the auto industry was born, there were hundreds of car manufacturers in the United States, and now there are 3.5, depending on how you do the counting, right? Every industry goes through that kind of consolidation, except apparently for cybersecurity, because every single day, even as the economy gets weird, even as we start looking forward and going, layoffs in the tech industry, another cybersecurity vendor. I will say two things fundamentally. Number one, you cannot possibly maintain a relationship or even a reasonable level of knowledge about all of those. Don't try. It's a fool's errand to go out there and try to evaluate every single provider. But on the flip side, it is mission critical that you are strenuously evaluating the capabilities of your vendors. It is not just a question of brand preference. It's not even as, if you think about the world of a value-added reseller, a solution provider who sells through a vendor's products to the end user. I have brand questions and functionality concerns. I want to resell a manufacturer's product that is going to reflect well on me. Mm-hmm. If that's true for a reseller, that's true times 10 for a managed security service provider, because that's not just a product you're reselling. That is a tool that becomes a part of you, and it will directly impact your credibility in the marketplace.
Sure. So then, Ryan, I don't know if this is maybe an oversimplification, but I almost see kind of, two steps to this strategy. It's like, first, you want to know what parts of the cyber services market you want to corner as an MSSP that best fits your overall vision. And then once you decide what you want to include in your repertoire, then you want to find the vendor that's going to best fit that particular gap that you're trying to fill. So maybe we could look at kind of both steps with this. For step one, when you're trying to decide, the next market that you want to corner as an MSSP, I want to add another vendor-fueled service to my repertoire. What gets factored into that decision? Are you taking feedback are you listening to what your clients are begging for? Are you following the trends? Are you really more just trying to maybe not necessarily be a follower, but forge your own path and differentiate? Like, what thoughts go into that process?
See, it's a terrific question, and I think you have nailed the two pieces of that process. What category of technology and managed security service should I be in? And then once I know the category, then I can assess and evaluate the vendors, right? Now, I will say that for the first question, as we're looking at market segmentation, I think there's far too much Me Too and following going on in the industry. Well, that guy does it, and 42% of people said it's a top priority. Therefore, I should probably be in it as well. That's not nearly a valid strategy for somebody doing something as mission critical as cybersecurity services. What we need is a proactive way to assess. And I will say a three-part balanced scorecard, if you will. It's not based on just trends. It's not based on opinions. It's not based on what my comfort level is or what kinds of technologies we've done before. It's a three-part balanced scorecard. And there's, you can score the factors in as detailed or as scientific a way as you want. Number one, the total addressable market for that opportunity. How many customers are out there that say in very specific terms that they have a need for that kind of a security service? And then related to that, what is the actual average deal value for providing something like that, right? Number of customers and the deal value gives us an idea of TAM, the total addressable market. The second criteria is internal capabilities, my business capabilities to actually do that work and succeed. Is it related to technologies with which we are already trained and certified? Is it something that we have the capacity to understand and operate in a delivery model? And is it something that we can, quite frankly, sell effectively to our customers? If those things are not true, kind of doesn't matter how big the market is. You and I both know, right? There are plenty of great big marketplaces out there where I am personally not qualified to participate, and that should be a filtering factor. But to balance that out, the third criteria is what we will call addressability or accessibility. In other words, think about the access to a specific set of decision makers who may say yes to this kind of an offer, the level of urgency or any critical precipitating factors that they are dealing with, and then the access to those individuals. Like, do we know those humans? Do we have their email address? Do we know how to reach out and have a credible conversation in that environment? If you balance total addressable market with my ability to succeed with client urgency and addressability, you can stack rank a million different technologies, right? I tend to look at it in my personal stack. I think there's 23 different categories of cybersecurity technology, and very few of us in the MSSP world should ever entertain the idea of doing all 23, right? That's a bridge too far, and what we need is to prioritize and say we do these core things, but we want to grow, we want to expand, we want to go to the next opportunity for our trusted client base. How do we prioritize? Do that balanced scorecard, and you will eliminate about 90% of the potential vendor assessments that need to go on. And I think we don't do that strategically enough. We go to a lot of conferences and a lot of vendors make presentations, and we go, that guy was good at PowerPoint. I like what he said about that one security thing. And then we add them to our portfolio. And as a result, I'm sure you've seen, you look inside the average vendor portfolio of an MSSP, and the tool bloat is shocking. We've adopted and gotten trained and certified on dozens of things that we will never sell. That's not acceptable.
Ryan, I like how you divided it up into those three categories or buckets, and then you can develop, criteria within some of those different categories, and that can help really hone in your vision, and then ultimately help you also pick out some the right vendor partner for you as well, ultimately. And let's talk a little bit more about that vendor selection process. I think back to a recent guest blog that was in MSSP Alert. It was written by Fortinet that talked about some of the necessary ingredients that a vendor must have for it to really play well with an MSSP's recipe for success. For them, what they put for number one on the list was an integratable and integrated solution. Number two was an enablement program. So I'm curious, in terms of, likes, and then maybe the flip side also, maybe what some of the turnoffs would be. What's the top of your list for you, in your opinion, in terms of what you think maybe the number one or number two most important ingredients are today? And then maybe the flip side, what's a red flag that this might not be a good fit? Yeah.
No. Yeah, that's a great question. And I like where Fortinet started in that conversation, because Did you notice that it's not about the product functionality, right? What we have determined across the industry is that almost all of these tools are pretty capable, right? Now, they may not be the most or the end all be all in terms of functionality, but we can do a technical assessment. My advice is that's kind of a go no go kind of a thing that happens on the side. It is not the first criteria that we ought to be we ought to be looking at. Think of this in terms of the business relationship first and foremost. This is not just a reseller to you. This is not a vendor who casually drops a piece of equipment into your environment and then pieces out and never interacts again. This is an integral part of a continuous professional relationship between not just organizations, but also individuals. And that gives us several criteria, right? Number one, are they going to continue to be in business? Because if you're about to go out of business, I'm not adopting your tool. Thank you very much. Number two, are they a compatible organization? In other words, do they want to work with the MSSP industry? And do they have formal programs, structures, benefits, pricing catalogs, et cetera, that make it systematic and easy to actually do business with them? There's far too many of these cybersecurity vendors who are all tuned up to sell direct to the end user. And then as a service provider, we come in and say, hey, I'd like to resell your capacities through to my install base. And they go, okay, cool. There's the customer price list. You can buy from there. And I will absolutely walk away from that vendor in that situation, right? I think that the third area is to look at their go-to-market strategy. How do they prioritize direct sales compared to through the channel and through those of us in the service provider industry? If it is an afterthought, you will feel that pain later on in the relationship. If they only prioritize direct sales and only end user relationships, and we are second-class citizens as service providers and an afterthought at the best in their go-to-market strategy, quite frankly, I don't want to be in that relationship. I'd like to be prioritized as somebody who is primary in my own significant long-term relationships. I don't think I can say, I don't think that applies only to cybersecurity vendors. All of us humans want to be treated that way in our personal and our professional relationships. So I think that that's where we begin from. I would end with the question of culture. Right? Because while I like the idea of integratability and functionality inside that product, once the product is in and it's integrated and we are in production using it, software is software and it doesn't tend to have much of a personality. But the human who calls on me from that vendor organization, they do have a personality. And if they are abrupt, if they are dismissive, if I can never get them on the phone, if they are condescending, style matters, right? Like I believe in an absolute mission critical sense. You know how people say, life's too short, life's too short. I will argue in the opposite. And I will say life is far too long to adopt tools from vendors who are mean and dismissive and don't have a good style relationship with you. You don't want to show up to work every single day and work with vendors that you have to beg for their attention. So start with the business, move to their go-to-market strategy, understand their operating environment and their go-to-market process, and then, hey, let's look at the personalities and say, do I like being in business with these guys? Because I don't know about you, there are plenty of technology products I've been asked to use over the years that it was a perfectly fine piece of software, but the guy who sold it to me, well, I didn't like talking to that person on the phone. And as a result, I had a very different relationship with that technology. As businesses, these become structural components of our fundamental operating capacity, right? These are not casual things we toss on the shelf and, hey, let's see if these things sell through. They become the arms and legs of our organization. We better like dealing with them every day.
Ryan, let's talk a little bit about some challenges or other issues that might surface in the process of building out your vendor alliances. How common of a scenario is it? And if it is, what is your take on it in terms of exclusivity clauses between MSSPs and vendors where one party might say, you can work with us, but then we don't want you working with this chief number one rival organization.
That absolutely happens. And I will tell you, in any dimension of human endeavor, forced loyalty is never sincere loyalty. I would want to have 100% of your attention. I would like to be the default designed in tool for your services that you provide through an absolutely indispensable component of your brand and your technical capability. But I need to earn that. Right? Like I need to earn that through not just my technical capabilities as a tool set, but also the business relationship and the personal relationships. I need to earn that kind of opportunity that leads you to a place where you voluntarily say, there's 17 other vendors who do almost exactly what you do, but I prefer you and I'm going to dispense with those relationships. The minute you try to require me to not do that, my question is, cool, can you reciprocate in kind? And if I have to have an exclusivity clause that I will not work with any other vendor in your category, will you also implement an exclusivity clause that says you won't work with any other service provider in my category? Oh, now it gets dicey. And you see what's happening here? It's leverage. It's a question of size and scope and market momentum. Fundamentally, it comes down to whose brand matters more to the end user. Vendors would love to crack a whip and say, you may not play with other friends than me on the playground during recess. And my answer is, dude, if you're fun, I'm going to hang out with you. But if you're not, I need you to earn it or go away. Don't you dare tell me who my other friends can be, because that's not good business. But to your point, oh my goodness, that's common out there. We see so many vendors that want to ride in on the big horse and say, me vendor, you service provider, you will do what I tell you to do. My answer is, I got the relationship with the end user. I think you ought to ask nicely if you would like for me to integrate and deploy your technologies to my customer base. That's a shifting power dynamic that's out there. And I think it's going to be curious to observe over the next couple of years whether vendors or service providers get the upper hand in that clout relationship.
All right, so Ryan, I know we're getting a little short on time, but I wanted to throw out one other scenario too that can perhaps be a challenge when, again, building out this team of vendors if you're an MSSP, and that is, what about the scenario of redundancies when you bring on multiple vendor partners with overlapping services and functionalities? How common a problem is that, and how do you perhaps resolve those redundancies?
See, that gets to the heart of the question. Which do you prefer? Best of breed for functional capability or integrated stacks of compatible technologies? I don't think there's a correct answer, and the pendulum will go back and forth. But what we will observe is that every time you adopt a best of breed, there are use cases at the edge of their functionality that inevitably are going to overlap with other tools that you already have. It may give you the benefit of a better core functionality, but with that, you also just adopted the integration and isolation job description, right? You are now the responsible party for, you went to Napa Auto Parts, you bought a bunch of bucket seats and a dashboard and a fuel pump and some spark plugs. And now you are the one who's responsible for putting all of that together. And every time a tool vendor comes back in with version 2, version 2.1, version 2.1.1, right? That's going to break your integrations, and it will eventually, if it's left unmanaged, disintegrate your entire technology stack. I personally, you might be surprised by my next statement, I personally prefer the concept of best of breed. If you're asking me, in my operating experience, I believe that I am a good judge of what the stacks of capabilities are and where my personal focus is. I don't need a vendor saying, we focused on the first 4 capabilities and then we added 14 more just because we thought it was a good idea. and then come to me and say, I sold you a tool that includes all of those things, and now you either have to learn to use them or disintegrate them from my pre-warranted stack. I don't have that dictated to me from an integrated suite point of view, but that's a personal preference, right? Because I have a tolerance for tools integration and maintaining the viability of my integrated stack. And I trust my relationship with my end users to say, you know what, they do want to pay for function 1, 2, and 3, but 4, 5, and 6, that's a waste of time. So I'm just not going to deploy that capability. I won't adopt a vendor that gets into there. That overlap of best of breed versus integrated tool sets, that has been a problem since the dawn of our industry in every technical category. It's never going to go away. That has to be a best practice for a service provider, right? It's cool that you know how to operate technology services. It's great that you know how to win customers and manage accounts. If you do not know how to professionally navigate your own supply chain, then at best you are a me too who does what everybody else can do because they all have exactly the same tools. At worst, you're a bucket of chaos with tools that overlap and don't share data, and they're not interfaceable with your PSA platforms, with your RMM platforms. That's not a desirable business model. So that becomes a core competency of a service provider. Like you got to do 100 things in your job, and 101 is you better become a supply chain professional. Excellent. So that is our big idea in business. What do you guys think? How do you evaluate vendors? What is your preferred methodology? And do you have a scorecard for that? We would love to hear that kind of feedback. So please let us know what's going on. You can reach us again, Cyber4Hire at cyberriskalliance.com. Let us know. We'd love to hear that kind of feedback, right? All right, now we're going to transition into another segment in our program. And this program is one where our job is to facilitate the counseling relationship between service provider and end user. This is Dear Cyber4Hire. Bradley, we know we get an awful lot of feedback on this segment. People obviously have some relationship questions. What is our latest issue?
All right, let's see what we have for today. Dear Cyber4Hire, I'm an MSSP at my wit's end. My client is a commitment phobe who just wants to keep it cash, while I'm ready to lock them into something much more everlasting. To put it another way, my customer wants all the perks of a full-fledged relationship, including dedicated access to specific technicians. Yet they refuse to sign a long-term contract that makes me feel confident that they're truly worth my attention and time investment. Am I being taken advantage of? Is this a passing fling? How do I convince them that we're meant to grow old together? Sincerely, feeling used in Utica.
See, I will tell you, they have hit on a hot button in this situation, and I'm sure you know this from your own personal experience. Clout and leverage in any commercial relationship leads to the terms of that contractual obligation and who gets to dictate versus who is dictated to. I tend to endorse the concept of long-term contract relationships in this industry, not just because I like contract relationships that pay recurring revenue over an extended period. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's cool, and I want a lot of those things, but that's not the primary reason. This is an evergreen function of business operations. This is not a project. This is not a temporary or a transactional relationship. This is something that has an onboarding process based on an assessment that leads to remediation, that leads to an operating production environment that has to be continuously tuned for high performance and incident management over an extended period of time. I believe from the customer's point of view, it is fundamentally bad business to continually be switching back and forth, right? You never get to full fifth gear in that relationship when you are constantly jumping the clutch and having to restart everything in the relationship. in my experience, I think that it's one of those weird and rare confluences where what is in the best interest of the seller is legitimately and sincerely in the business best interest of the end user. That's not just a sales pitch. That is literally best practice from the consumer, the user's point of view, that client side of, I need consistency, I need depth of understanding. I need you to know me as well as I know my own operation. And from the provider's point of view, hey, I would like consistency and dedication, and I would like forecast accuracy so that I can staff accordingly. It's in everybody's best interest. And yet, exactly as this letter writer has indicated, it comes down to personality and style. I am the one in charge of this relationship if I can dictate the length of the contract commitment. Customers don't like to give up that whip, right? They don't want to have some service providers feel lazy or start to feel entitled or anything like that. They want to say, you know what? No 3-year contract, month to month. Prove it to me every single month. You have to earn my business. You know what? That's cool, but you're about to have a terrible cybersecurity track record if that's how you are treating people. This is why the sales process is a little bit more complicated, right? Because believe me, I have lawyers, you have lawyers, we all have there's no such thing as a contract that can't be canceled or gotten out of somewhere midterm, right? That absolutely can be done. But for the sake of predictability and in the spirit of intention, if you do not intend to be in business with me for an extended period of time, I think maybe there's a better provider for you that could deal with your onesie twosie cybersecurity problems, and you're not quite ready, I think, as a customer to take this as seriously as you should.
Ryan, you made a very good business case for how it's mutually beneficial to get into a longer contract, because it really does take time to build that relationship up properly and get everything clicking. But let's just say that in this particular case, it's no sale on your customer. They're not quite buying it right now. They want to stay kind of short term in the meantime. How do you then handle this situation where they do feel still entitled to call certain shots on things like, we want a specific technician? Do you bend to their demands because after all, they're still the customer and the customer is always right? Or, is there some middle ground? How do you handle that situation?
There has to be middle ground, right? It's a clause in a contract that we are negotiating. And so probably the absolute in either direction is not what's going to be the end result. The end result should be, you would like access to a dedicated technician? That's a feature of our contract commitments, because we need to be able to commit that human and then compensate for his lack of availability across other elements of our business, probably by hiring another human being. Your revenue commitment gives us the certainty to be able to do that thing. Oh, but I don't want to sign a long-term contract. I still want access to dedicated people. That's cool. Let's meet you in the middle. And my answer would be something along the lines of, we're going to sign an agreement that says you get this dedicated person with no long-term commitment. But when you cancel at some point in the future, if it is any time less than 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, we can have milestones. There's going to be a buyout clause. In order for you to walk away, you're going to need to buy out. Now, where did we learn that contractual practice? Your cell phone provider. Right? You have a 2-year contract with your cell phone company, and they would totally let you walk away at 6 months or at 4 months or whenever in the heck you feel like it for a fee. And so I would insert a fee in that situation. I believe in that case, you've touched on like the golden nugget. My process is my foundation, my methodology, my systems integration. That's what makes my service a machine. But my special qualified human beings, those are rare and difficult to replicate. You pay extra for that. If you want dedicated access to a superhuman talent to manage your environment, that's exactly why we hired them, because they're good. And if they're good, they're expensive.
All right. Well, hopefully our listeners have learned from this dramatization that we presented to you today and that they don't make the same mistake. And remember, if you've been struggling with your managed security services relationship, whether you're the user or the provider, we want to hear from you. So please write to us at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com, and we might use your letter in a future episode. In the meantime, as any security practitioner can tell you, there's no shortage of headlines that's filling up the cyber news feeds every single day. And so we wanted to highlight a few items that we curated just for you, and so we present to you the security detail. All right, let's get into it. Headline number one for you, Ryan, a study by Blue Voyant, private equity portfolios susceptible to cyber attacks.
You know what? Color me surprised. Actually, I'm just being a smartass. What I mean is to say the natural methodology of cyber attacks is to look for points of aggregation. I don't want to attack individual targets one by one by one. I'm looking for multiplier effects. I want to go to a cloud hosting environment. I want to go to an MSP and get access through to all of their customers and devices under management. In the very same way, a private equity portfolio is a point of aggregation. And given the methodology that they use for standard business practices, shared services for accounting, human resources, et cetera, when they're incubating companies up and making those kinds of investments, it stands to reason that that would be a very vulnerable target. But that also makes them a terrific target for a potential client, for an MSSP. I say, let's go have a conversation with them and say, money is good and best practice in business development is nice. But if you lose all your data and every one of your other clients chooses to leave the portfolio, y'all are going out of business. So let me solve that problem for you, and you just focus on the business development side. Very good client opportunity. Headline number two, for your analysis, Bradley, roughly 9 out of 10 defense contractors fail to meet basic cybersecurity requirements. Holy crap. What is your analysis?
Well, let me tell you, Ryan, this research was commissioned by CyberSheath. It consisted of a survey of about 300 DoD contractors. According to SE Media, only 13% of respondents achieved the minimal acceptable score in the DoD's supplier performance risk system. Not even full compliance, but just good enough. 8 and 10 respondents said they lack a vulnerability management solution. 8 and 10, basically also the same, said they lack a comprehensive MFA. Over 73% said they lack an endpoint detection and response system. So one key potential solution that was offered up by the CEO of CyberSheath, Eric Noonan, was that DoD contractors should consider collaborating more with managed services providers and professional services providers who are better equipped to shut down some of these sources of cyber risk. Now, with that said, however, when you go with an MSSP, you of course need to make sure that they're up on all of the latest relevant industry-specific regulations. And so when you're talking about, DoD contractors, that would be things like DFARS and CMMC.
It's certain market segments have higher or lower urgencies and priorities. It's not like these guys are dealing with bombs and guns and stuff. I mean, why would they care about cybersecurity?
It's a mystery to us all. All right, headline number 3 for you, Ryan. NATO readies for cyber war. Simulation shows united front against attack.
Speaking of guns and bombs and bullets and everything, a new front in the world of war is cybersecurity. And given the proliferation of nation-state attacks and the continuing unrest between Russia and Ukraine, there are obvious high priority needs for this. And so it's really reassuring to me, quite frankly. I don't think they've solved all the problems of the world, but this simulation indicates that smart people are paying attention, and that's a very good thing. But what I find even more interesting from a service provider's point of view is this sounds like a very repeatable service offering, right? In addition to your assessments and your managed services and your pen testing and all of the work that you currently do, a simulation environment that gamifies cybersecurity threats and incidents could give a real world test to whether or not we are ready to make rapid switches of systems and data resources, and whether we can do this in real time under the pressure of the threat as well as the exposure that's going on out there. I think this is a very interesting, repeatable business opportunity. Think about how you could come up with a simulation for your customers, and then let's package and price that thing. It's a very, very good idea. Headline number 4 for your analysis, Bradley. A new study looks at the best and worst states to work in for cybersecurity. Where does your state rank?
All right. Yeah. Now, this study from Comparitech looked at several factors: annual salary for one, job growth projections, and the percentage share of the job market that cybersecurity roles would fall into. And so the number one probably would be one that you wouldn't expect. You want to just take a guess at it, Ryan? It's like totally like on the spot. You would never guess this. But
I'll make a random guess. It's not California and it's not Massachusetts. It might be somewhere in the middle of the country. Am I close?
It is Iowa. Yeah, so you did a good job there. Yeah, Iowa is. Yeah, Iowa's number one. It has an annual average salary of about 125,650. The biggest average annual salary increases for InfoSec analysts were observed. Also, Iowa was top with that, about a 44% increase, followed by California and then South Carolina and Maryland. The study attributes some of these increases to various state initiatives designed to give a boost to the cyber job market. On the flip side, Puerto Rico was ranked lowest. Puerto Rico and District of Columbia were also included in there, so there were 52. Nevada, in particularly, had the dubious distinction of going from third overall the last time to all the way down to 48th out of 52.
Ouch.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff to unpack there. So much more that we can go into just here in this short amount of time. But
yeah,
see our show.
Terrific analysis. By the way, we are always highly invested in the question of human resources in cybersecurity. So this is another thing that indicates some people are doing it well. You could too. Let's learn some lessons. That's a great article.
Yeah, absolutely. And see our show notes for a link to the study so that you can dig in even further on some more of the details. And so finally, that brings us to, drum roll please, our irrelevant news item of the week. This is a real news pitch that Ryan or I have received in our inboxes for reasons that are, as always, entirely inexplicable to us. Are you ready, Ryan? Because here comes the pitch.
I am waiting with bated breath.
All right. Well, this one's impressive because not only does it have nothing to do with cyber, it's also just the wrong part of the world that we live in. So Nextbase warns that there will be a record number of student drivers on the road in the UK this December and January due to a combination of free lesson vouchers and a wave of aspiring drivers who waited until after the pandemic to earn their license. And so if you thought that holiday traffic was bad already, watch out. As it is, they already all drive on the wrong side of the road to begin with. So, Ryan, what I want to ask you is this. According to this research, those who get behind the wheel for a practical test are very often failing their first try, including in the past year, about 869,000 individuals failed in the past year on their first try of their driving test. Ryan, I want you to think back to when you were a student driver. Did you pass on your first attempt?
I absolutely passed on my first attempt. And it's not because I'm some special genius. It's because we drove actual cars for the practice process, right? As we see it, having had kids and nephews, nieces that have gone through this process over the last several years, the vast majority of instruction for driver's education is now done either in a book or via computer simulation, which, hey, we're fans of computer simulation, but that doesn't equal stepping on the brake real hard when you're getting close to the car in front of you. You gotta experience those things. This is a physical thing, so I am not remotely surprised that most of them are failing the first time, but I am terrified.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that I passed on my first go-round. At least it wasn't something terrible, like 5 times. I passed on my second try. On my first try, yeah, I did a weird thing, though, where my first test. I think I was just nervous. Guy told me to make a left turn, and for some reason I was on like a divided roadway, and I made a full U-turn around a barrier instead of just making a regular left turn. And maybe I would have gotten away with it, except that there was a no U-turn sign right there. So that pretty much sealed the deal. But
Details. What I will say is, in my early 30s, I had to recertify, right? Because my license had expired and I needed to come up. And I didn't think they were going to make me take the driving part of the test. So I showed up in a buddy's van, a 15-passenger van. and you are not surprised to learn that that individual who was proctoring the test, yes, he did make me parallel park that thing. And it was nerve-wracking. And it worked out okay. But yeah, let me tell you, they have fun at their jobs as well.
I'm sure. Well, listen, we're only a few years away from self-driving cars anyway, right? So it's all going to be moot once that happens, right?
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, with that, we've run out of time. But don't worry, we'll be back again soon for episode number 6. Meanwhile, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E, all 3 of those websites. So until next time, I'm Bradley Barth.
And I am Ryan Morris. Please reach out to us to let us know what your feedback, questions, and comments are on any of the topics that we've discussed today, as well as things that you think are high priority and would like to hear about in the future. Cyber for Hire at cyberriskalliance.com. That's where you can reach us, and we would love to keep this conversation going in future episodes. We are Cyber for Hire, your inside source for cyber outsourcing.